أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين اللهم افتح لنا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to everyone and everyone on Zoom as well. Inshallah, this is a kind of a second part to the session we did on the importance of reading and literature. And actually, I was just thinking about it today, and in terms of what I had prepared, maybe the topic would be slightly different, because what I want to look at today, inshallah, is I mentioned quite a few things last session, but I didn't really go too deep into it. So there's a lot more that I want to cover today, inshallah. And one of the things I want to start with is why that topic is the way it is. Because if you look at it, the importance of reading and literature, the argument can be made that we are a literate society. And if you look at statistics published by every country the world over, almost every country has got at least a 90% literacy rate, meaning that at least 90% of their population, overall, is able to read and write. So, why are we experiencing kind of why is such a topic so important? Why are we talking about literature, and why are we talking about the importance of reading when much of the world's population is reading? And what I want to look at today is that there is actually a difference between what we would call a literate society and a post-literate society. The post-literate society is the society that we're looking at today, that has evolved over the last maybe about 15 to 20 years past. And it is the society in which the medium of reading has changed from what was prior a physical medium, a print medium, what we would say a print medium, to what is now a digital medium. And that's really going to be the focus of what I want to talk about today, inshallah. The literate society is a society which was capable of, and note how I'm using that in the past tense, it was capable of looking at text both in short form construct and in long form construct, and was able to not only understand the letters and the words that were being formed, in addition to the meanings of those words, the definitions of those words, and their contextual applications, and was able to abstract whatever idea was being conveyed in those sentences. So this was a society that could sit and read long form content without breaking their attention and be fully immersed in what they were reading, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. The post-literate society, where now that form of reading has been replaced by digital devices, in which digital devices have introduced a kind of information delivery system that is quick, fast-paced, short form, as short as possible, whether it's in written form or it's video form or it's audio form. It is primarily designed solely for the transmission of information. It's just an information delivery system. And it is such an entity that demands attention to be quickly transformed from one state to another, whereby the information, once it's delivered, that's pretty much it. There is no more that can be done. After that, it has to move on to the next bit of information and the next bit of information, and so on and so forth. So this is where you are now seeing other effects that are happening in society, where you're having things like attention problems, and you're having disorders now in large magnitudes like ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorders, whereby people are no longer able to retain information and are no longer able to retain their attention to what they are, what the information is giving them. And that's because our lifestyles have completely changed entirely. The post-literate society lived in a way whereby reading physical books was part of an individual's lifestyle. The very layout of their home, for example, had a designated place for reading, in addition to a designated place for eating or for sleeping or for lounging. You would find at least a bookshelf, and prior to that, pre-modern society also had, just like a reading room, an entire room that was dedicated solely for reading, where they just had books in there, and they had a special chair that would be, it was designated for, it was part of that lifestyle. And that's been removed now. And lifestyle is now whereby all of that has been digitized to follow you around in your pocket, but it's never really utilized. And even when it is utilized, it does not have the profound implication that the previous lifestyle had of reading from a physical medium. Now, reading, I have a taxonomy of what modes of reading. There are different kinds. There are different taxonomies on that, but I have a taxonomy on that. Reading, there are two general modes of reading, and each of those has got two sort of sub-modes in reading. One is reading for information, and the other is reading for knowledge. Reading for information has got two modes. One is general purpose information, and the other is information for study. So general purpose information is basically things like, like a text message on your phone, or a news headline, or something like a short form article, or something like that. It's just hubbub. It's just giving you, like, in a very basic, succinct form, comprehensive form of something, information about something, whether it's an incident that happened or whatever it might be. From that, general purpose information is where now the individual might go into a deeper form of reading, which is now they would basically be studying that particular information. They would dig out more facts and figures and theories and data, and then interpret that. So that's where the study portion comes in. And that study portion also includes things that people study in school and university and college and that stuff. So textbooks will fall in that category. So that's reading for study. Then there is reading for knowledge, and that has got two modes as well. The first of those is critical thought. This is a kind of reading that it's not based off of information. It is based off of reading material that is more philosophical in nature, where you've got arguments and you've got discourses and you've got long form essays on particular topics that really go deep into it, and where they might provide things like facts and figures and these type of things. That type of reading is meant to really submerge the reader into deeper levels of thinking. And then finally, we've got reading for immersion. And this is where now the imaginative faculty is activated on multiple levels. It is the kind of reading that surpasses critical thought. We're not doing analysis or data interpretation or facts and figures. We are just basically immersed in a particular world, whether that's presented as fiction or nonfiction. We're just immersed in it, and it's mainly purposed for contemplation and reflection. And this taxonomy of reading, it moves from information to knowledge. It moves where general purpose reading provides you with simple apprehension, and then reading for study provides you with a type of like an ordered comprehension, whereby the information is structured in a certain way. And then critical thinking provides you with reflective judgment, because you can look at arguments and you can look at the possibilities or counter arguments, and then kind of come up with either an agreeable proposition or, okay, I don't agree with what he's saying because he's saying it like this and like that. That's critical thinking. So that's reflective judgment. And the final portion, which is immersion, and that's to do with imagination, is where you now have deeper understanding. Now, this spectrum follows the operations of the mind. The three operations of the mind, which are the simple apprehension, what we call tasawwur as-sadij, and then you've got the ordered comprehension of it, which is the how-ness of a thing. And that's where you will have things like tasdeeq, where you've got like propositions and proposals, you've got facts, you've got figures, you've got statements. And then you have qiyas, which takes place on now in terms of building syllogisms and reasons and arguments. And all of these three, they take you along the logical pathway. So you're dealing with information and you're converting information into knowledge. But the fourth portion, which is to do with immersion, that now takes you beyond the logical elements. It takes you into the ontology and the teleology of things. You're now going into like simulated environments whereby aspects of the real world that you could examine in, let's say, science or study or something like that, those aspects are now simulated in a different environment whereby some kind of exploration can take place. Again, this could be fictional or non-fictional. It doesn't really matter, but this is the field whereby now almost the entirety of one's cognitive faculties are fully activated. Now, what's the difference then in this case? Because we have the material there, then why are we still facing this crisis in literacy? Because it is a crisis, and it is a crisis acknowledged by every country in the world. The PISA, which does studies on education and produces their studies every year, released their, I think it was the 24 result or the 23 statistics, in which they say that on average, global literacy rates have dropped down to 40%, which is really an astounding thing, whereby individual countries are reporting 90% literacy rates. But their analysis on this was that even though there is that 90% literacy rates, majority of those who are supposed to actually attain the baseline reading criteria, even in academics, they are not meeting that criteria. They're far below by maybe 2 or 3, even 3 years. There are different countries, for example, they say that many of their students who are, let's say, like at the 8th grade level are not able to read 8th grade level curriculum books. They are still stuck on like the 5th grade level and below. So the crisis is saying, well, the statistics are saying that, well, only 40% of the world is at a proficient level of literacy. Now, that in itself is very astounding, because it means that 60% is not literate at the level at which literacy is required. Now, that 40% includes people of the previous generation. So those individuals who are of the older generation are included in that 40% that is able to read long-form content and abstraction of ideas from long-form content. That 60% is including the current generation. The generation that has replaced, that's who, the lifestyle of that generation is no longer guided by books, by physical books. It's guided by digital media. And the argument can be made, well, I read books, I read it on my phone, or I read it on my tablet, or I read it on my computer or something. But there are studies that also show that doesn't necessarily make one literate. In fact, they've done a lot of studies. There's one study that they did was very interesting, I found, was they had two groups and they gave both groups the same material. One group was given physical paper, an essay to read, and the other group was given the same essay, but they had to read it in any device of their choosing. And what they found between the two groups afterwards, when they would question and ask them questions with regards to the material that they read, the group that had devices, they performed 25% less than the other group. And they also exhibited other very troubling signs. One of those signs was they demonstrated symptoms of ADHD even though they were not diagnosed with ADHD, which is a really astounding part of that study. The fact that they were not able to give their attention. They couldn't give their attention to whatever they were reading. And after they finished reading that, as they were answering the questions, their attention kept shifting. They were unable to even focus on the questions that were being asked because they weren't getting the question. They weren't able to put the question in perspective of what it is that they had read or what was being asked of them. Another thing that they found was that group demonstrated what's known as metacognitive failure. Metacognitive failure is similar to what's also known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Metacognitive failure is basically, it's like a lack of understanding, in the sense that due to a poor learning process. It's basically somebody who has an incredible amount of confidence in what they have understood, but they do not actually have an understanding of it. So this group, basically, when they were reading, they understood while they were reading, and that boosted their confidence in terms of the knowledge that they acquired from that reading. But then they were not able to retain that knowledge in terms of understanding or in terms of memory. They could not even recollect what they had read. But their confidence remained high. So when they were being asked those questions, they weren't able to understand that. But for some reason, they were pretty confident that they knew the answers, which was really astounding in itself. In the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's something similar that happens in the Dunning-Kruger. The Dunning-Kruger, you want to put this on charge? Because I saw the charger is off. I think it might go off. It's right down there. Yeah. The Dunning-Kruger, it's actually interesting that you can see the graph depictions of that. It's got like a this type of graph. I'm doing it the other way. For you guys, it will look like this, with a sharp increase and then a sudden decrease and then a gradual slope back upwards. And it demonstrates that at point 0, this is a graph of knowledge against confidence. At point 0, both knowledge and confidence are 0. So the person does not know, he doesn't have knowledge on a subject. And so his confidence is also 0 on that matter. And then he has limited knowledge, or he's given limited knowledge. Maybe you will read a book, or maybe we'll read an essay, or watch everything is now basically watch a YouTube lecture or a short YouTube clip or something. And there's some who are even demonstrating that effect based off of just like those 30-second TikTok clips. like where they have like a small packet of information, and they suddenly feel like they know all about that subject based on that little bit of information. And so what happens is that the point zero, with limited knowledge, they have a sudden sharp increase in confidence level. And so they're so confident that they're basically they think that they're an expert on that subject. And then when when they interact with the real world, whether it's through experience or whether it's through discourse or discussion with somebody, and then their faults or their mistakes are starting to point out to them, they hit, like they really fall very hard and hit the rock bottom. And that peak, by the way, is called the peak of Mount Stupid. That's the name for it, the peak of Mount Stupid. And when they drop into what's called the valley of despair. They fall into an incredible amount of depression. And then now most people, the problem is that they stay there, because it requires a lot of effort to overcome one's own hubris and arrogance, which they had at the top there. But those who manage to overcome that, they start learning slowly, and they start, okay, now I need to learn more about this. And so they acquire more and more knowledge. And so they start, rising back up again. Their amount of knowledge increases, and then their amount of confidence also increases. So those people, that group in that study who were investigated, they demonstrated that effect. With limited knowledge, they thought that they had incredible confidence, thinking that they had basically experts on that subject, which they were not. But then they retained that level of confidence, which was the astounding piece of it. The reason later on discovered as to why it is that this group did not, even though they're both looking at the same information, they're reading the same text and essay, why were they able to retain that information and the understanding of it? And that's to do with the medium itself. The way the medium operates is, if you have a physical book, you're not just reading the text block. There are a lot of other elements in there that the brain is acquiring in terms of information, and is registering all these bits and pieces, which it is going to use to build the memory of what's being read. And when it comes to recollection, episodic memory is going to use whatever information, additional tertiary information, was tied to that moment of reading to build the memory by which the person will be able to recollect the information that they had learned before. And these are things like, for example, in terms of a text block on a page, where the idea appeared when they were reading it. Was it in the top page? Was it in the bottom page? Was it on this side page, or was it on that side page? Was it towards the opening of the page, or was it more towards the spine of the page? It also depends on the light that is falling on that page and what angle that the light is coming on. That's also being registered by the brain. The shadow of the print itself, like in older texts, the print machine was a stencil print, so the letters would have a dip on the page. It's very subtle, it's very small, but if you really look close enough, you'll be able to see that dip on the page. And so there's a shadow that's created there. The brain registers that information. It registers, how the characters are aligned. Some are misaligned due to the print. In some parts, there might be imperfections, like an ink smudge. The very texture of the page and the grain of the paper, that also pops up. You can see that on the paper. And so all these things, the brain was picking them up and registering all these things. So when they were told to recollect that information, they were able to recollect that information better, because all these other things around them were contributing to reconstructing their memory. And it wasn't just their visual information. There were other things like auditory information, sounds that were around them, the ambience that was around them, the turn of the page and the rustle of the page of the paper, the texture with which they were feeling the paper. all these things contribute, the posture in which they were seated, because reading a book requires a certain kind of posture, even though you can change the posture. But in many cases, even the weight of the book, the way you're holding it, which will also change as you are, maybe opening it further, or how you're going to carry it. All that is additional tertiary information that is provided to the brain to register, and thus able to absorb the material much better and recollect it much better. Whereas in contrast to the digital medium, all of that tertiary information is gone. The brain doesn't get any of that. The only thing that the brain gets is the text that's there on the screen, which is pristine, has got no imperfections, nothing that can be noted by the brain. And even insofar as the motion of the eyes is concerned, it would just remain within that general area or the middle area of the screen, because you are using the scroll effect, right? They're just using the scroll. So the text is scrolling upwards, but the eyes are not moving. So there's no other periphery vision in which certain things around you can be encountered, whether it's color or it's texture, it's light. Further than that, it's the light itself. There's no angle in which the light is coming to provide any sort of, contrast or brightness varying on the page, and there are no shadows being created by that. This is also profound because it explains further now things like ADHD and all that, why they were demonstrating those symptoms. Because first of all, the science is very basic on this, if people actually think about this. The way things are known by visual cognition is when light hits an object, and then that light gets reflected into the eye, and then it's registered. The reflected light, that's secondary. It's not the primary source of light. So, in this case, if I have a book, right, and I have light coming in from somewhere, I hope you guys can see this on the camera. If I have light coming in from somewhere, it's that light source that's touching the page, and then that light is coming into my eyes. So there is variance. There's a variance in light and shadow. There are certain imperfections that are highlighted on the surface of the book, and this is information that's registered. But if you have a device, then that device is emitting the light. It's not reflected light. It's emitting the light directly into the eye. So the brain is registering force-fed information. It's not registering reflected information. It's not registering reflected light packets. It's not looking for the markers between light and shadow. This is very important, because a lot of our lifestyles is guided by direct light input. When night comes around, you switch on the light. It's just light is directly coming into your eyes. Okay, you're spending the whole day in the office. You've got that light is directly in your eyes. It's light coming straight into you. If you're looking at a computer screen, that's light coming directly. So that information is not secondary information. It's primary information. And the brain is registering that primary information in a digitized format. It's not analog. It doesn't have a range. It doesn't have a spectrum. So the brain doesn't have markers that it can allocate on that spectrum of information to say, okay, this is primary, and then these are all tertiary. And then it constructs the memory based on that. You're getting digitized pixels that are turning on and off at a set rate. They have got no imperfections, no shadow information, no light, the range. There's no hue, there's no saturation, there's no all that stuff is not there. There's no specular. There are no minor reflections, because on text, you also on physical medium, the text also has a kind of reflection on it that's registered by the brain, because it's ink, and it has a bit of reflection on it. So, and then the eye's motion as well from the top of the page that moves down on a physical medium in that diagonal format until it reaches, because it will start, let's say, from a high light position to a low light position, and then it's going to move again to another side, and then go again down, and then there's the turning of the page. The motion of the eyes is much more dynamic. And while the eyes are following the page itself, there is peripheral vision that also gets registered by the brain. The pause in between the turning of the page is a minute, it's very small, but it has a certain register in the brain in terms of it gives a kind of a lapse in between, a kind of a reflective lapse in between. And so, the memory is registered that this idea was on this side of the page. And then that idea was on this side of the page. And then, the page had to be turned and that the idea continued on this side of the page. All that is being registered. Whereas on the device, none of that is taking place. The eyes don't actually move. And even if they move, they don't have a range of motion, a very limited range of motion. Most of it is scroll effect. And there are apps I know that give you that effect, like a page turning effect. But again, it's a simulation. It's not real page turning. It's a simulation. The brain knows that it's a simulation because you know that it's a simulation. And the actual light transformation, as you turn the page, the shadow and then the shift in posture and position and the texture of it, all of that is not being registered anyway. So it's just an illusion. And this is why there's nothing else that supports the information that you're reading is not supported in any way. You see? So it's completely deficient. Now, majority of the population, why the literacy rate is declining is because that's their primary source of information. And when I say primary, I mean like for most people, that's the only source of information, the device. They have no other source of information because nobody reads newsprints anymore. Nobody reads a physical newspaper anymore. I don't even know. I've seen a lot of newspapers being printed, but it's mostly just advertisements. They don't actually have news articles in them because, the news is coming and going so fast that for them to catch up to that, they have to, they cannot keep up with newsprints anymore. They can't print. They have to post it as soon as it comes in. Or otherwise, they'll get left behind in the competition. But all other news information, there was a time when, letters used to be sent back and forth between family members. And so there was a lot more, you knew that there's limited space and, to send to send somebody a message. And so there was a lot more qualitative information as opposed to just quantity being filled up in a letter. But then now you can just send a text message and it doesn't really mean anything. A lot of it is just, even words are no longer being used. It's just emojis are used to express emotions because that's what an emoji is. And it's an emoticon. It's an icon that is meant to express an emotion. But there was a time when you had to know how to express an emotion through words alone, to tell somebody how you feel or what's going on around you or what happened and how it affected you and all of that, which you no longer need to do that. You could just press that button and that's the message. And a lot of messages are like that. They're just hollow. They're just empty. They're placeholders meant to either react or prompt a reaction from the other end. And this is what this is the content that is being consumed by people day in, day out. There's no constructive reading. Information now in terms of reading is stuck on the first mode of reading, which is, general purpose, simple apprehension. If it goes into the next stage of it, which is for study purposes, it's mostly just for whatever program somebody is doing, if they're getting a degree or a college, whatever, and it's not meant to, for them, it's not meant to take them further into the knowledge area because they're not doing it for knowledge. They're not seeking knowledge for knowledge's sake. They're seeking it so that they can get that piece of paper, which will get them a job. That's really all they're interested in. That's why they're going through those 4 years or 2 years or whatever, how long. It is not to advance in understanding. It is not to increase in knowledge, nor contribute to knowledge. Everyone is targeting more towards learning for the sake of making money in the once they finish their learning process. So nobody wants to dedicate, the time to sit and read a physical book. And hence nobody's actually sitting and reading a physical book, and a book that is going to it's not a book that falls in the category of simple apprehension and study, but a book that fits into the categories of critical thought and immersion. They're not able to do that. They cannot give that. They don't have the attention capacity for that, because whatever it is that they want to get, their information, it is coming through the device, and it is just being fed, like a machine to them constantly. There are people who will spend hours on, whatever their social media and doom scrolling. There are people who will, the first thing they wake up, they will open and check their notifications and that stuff. There are people who cannot even walk down the street without having a phone in their hand, which, I mean, it's just strange. Because like there was a time that I was, I sometimes the adhan is done like asr, and I go outside in the balcony to listen to the adhan. And there's a day I was just out there, and I saw a man who was walking up the street, and he's an older man, older than me. I mean, judging by the white hair of his beard and his hair. And he had his phone in his hand. And he looked like he was just coming back from work. And he's walking. And for some reason, I don't know, I just started having a dialogue with myself. One side of me was saying he's going to hit the wall. And then the other side was saying, no, he's not going to hit the wall. Because as he was walking, I kind of noticed his trajectory was off the path. He was heading straight for the wall. So one side of me kept saying, he's going to hit the wall. And the other side, he's not going to hit the wall. And then in a few short steps, boom, he walks right into the wall. And I don't know, maybe this was just cynical of me, because the one side then told the other side, see, I told you he's going to hit the wall. And what the irony of that is, I mean, it was funny. It's funny in hindsight. I wasn't laughing at that time. I was just staring at the man. But the irony of it was, this man is a grown man. He's got his phone out and he's walking, and he walks right into the wall. And then he stopped suddenly when, he hit the wall, and he just looked around. I don't think he saw me. He didn't notice me. He just looked around and figured nobody saw that, and then fixed his trajectory and kept walking, but he still kept using the phone. He's just, whatever he was doing on it, he just kept using the phone and kept going down the street. And I just had to remark it. I said, isn't it, I mean, how you're a grown man. I could understand a teenager doing that, but you can't even see where you're going. You can't even see where you're walking. And I don't know, it's just amazing. There's a time I saw a woman. I'd gone to pick up my son from school. I was waiting for him, and I saw a woman with her daughter, and she had a bag of groceries. I think she had probably gone shopping before and then passed by the school to pick up her daughter. And in one hand, she had a bag of groceries and her daughter's school bag. And in the other hand, she had her phone. And her daughter's walking right beside her. And she was maybe about 5-6 years, so she didn't need to hold her hand. But the daughter's there, and she's jumping and skipping and pointing, and she was saying stuff. And the mother, probably was her mother, maybe, wasn't even paying attention to that. She just had the phone in her hand, and she's just scrolling, and she can barely see where she's going, and she's not even nodding or saying or something like I'm listening to. She's not paying attention to her own child, and she's just walking with those groceries. And then I see the most remarkable of things happen. They stop at the corner of the street. She turns around, looks at the daughter, and then takes a picture of the daughter. She tells the daughter, smile and whatnot, and then she takes a picture of the daughter and then continues walking, crossing the street. And the phone is still in the hand. And she's just going. And I sit there thinking, what a loser. What a loser. Loser in terms of you've picked up your child. You haven't seen your child the whole day. And just look at her. She's so happy to see you. She's so happy. She wants to tell you about her day. She wants to look at stuff and say, ask maybe like, what is that? And, she wants to sing or whatever she wants to do. And you could care less about her. They're so interesting, whatever it is you're doing on your phone. And then you stop and take a picture of her. Okay, so I've recorded the moment of the day, hashtag picked up kid from school, and then posted that most likely, and then just went on with your life. What a loser. Because you're going to look back in your life and wonder, where did those years go? Because that's like a daily routine, most likely. The way you're doing it is like a daily routine for you. You could care less about your child picked up from school. I don't know. It's just very strange. These are grown people. These are adults who are, if you look at them, they're acting like children. Now, what sort of tarbiyah is being done in that regard? What is that daughter going to do when she grows up and she has her own child? What is she going to do? She's going to do the exact same thing. Why? Because she saw her mother do the exact same thing. There's no memory that's being created here that's a good memory. There are people who might be able to remember when your parents picked you up from school at a time when these phones and stuff did not exist. There are people who will have very good memories about that. My father used to pick me from school, and then we used to go to wherever, and then we would sit or he would buy, like for us, my mom used to buy like maize cob and stuff. I remember one time my grandfather used to pick me up on every Jummah. I was probably in the second grade. He used to pick me up from Jummah, from school on Jummah. Just around the time when it is time for prayer, and then we would go to the masjid together, and then he would pray Jummah there, and then after that we would walk home together. I remember that, and I remember that because of that pleasant memory. That was because he would hold my hand and he would ask me questions. What did you do? What was this? What was that? And then my kid self would just be rambling about whatever. But it's the memory that it gets implanted in me. And that's part of my nurturing, because when I pick up my child from school, I am so happy to see them. I haven't seen them all day. I'm so happy to see them. I have a big smile. It's not an act, but this is part of nurturing. Now, if you're going to handle your children in this manner, whereby you could care less, then their children, they will treat their children the same way. And when you're old and unable to carry yourself, they will treat you the same way. They will care less what's going on with you. They will not call you. They will not talk to you. They'll send you off in a home somewhere, because you could have cared less when you were small, when they were small. So, this kind of, this is not just, isolated incident. I could name 100 different incidents. There's one time I saw a woman who was walking down this same street just outside my house, and my desk is angled at such like I can see outside the window. And she's walking down, she's got a garbage bag in her hand. And she's walking, she's got a phone in her hand. She's probably maybe around, 30 years old or something. I stroke that. Second. Whatever, leave it, just leave it, it's fine. Just leave it. She's probably maybe 30 years old or something. And she's walking down the street. She's not even seeing where she's going. And a car is coming up the other way. And she almost got hit by the car. The car stopped just immediately right there. And she didn't even, like there was no shock or anything on her face. She just looked at the driver and, like a shrug over shoulder, whatever, and then just kept walking. And once again, back on the phone. One hand is garbage bag, the other hand is garbage thing. So she's just carrying garbage in both her hands anyway. They're both the same thing. And then she walks to the dumpster, and without looking, she just raises the bag and then just drops it. And here's the thing, she didn't actually drop it in the dumpster. It just fell on the side. But she wasn't even paying attention to that. She just turns right around, walks across the street, and stands there, and she's still doing her scrolling. All that while, she's got no clue what she's doing or where she is. And it makes you wonder, what is so important? What is so important that you would be so distracted to the degree of nearly, getting yourself hit by a car? What is so important? Before all these phones and stuff were invented, people of high intellect, like geniuses, that's the kind of behavior they used to have. You see, like if you look at like depictions of scientists, they're always depicted with having like this fuzzy hair that's never combed, right? Or if they'll be like walking and completely distracted, or like there's one cartoon clip that I saw that the scientist is working, and they, like, somebody puts a cup of tea there, and the tea just stays there, it goes cold, and he's got no clue that it's there. He's so immersed in whatever work he's doing. That's the kind of, but that's something of somebody of a high intelligence. They're engaged in something of depth, of critical thinking. What is it that you're doing on your phone that requires critical thinking, that you're so distracted from the world? And what is it that you've missed from the world around you? Those are the moments when you're walking just to do some menial task like that. That's the time when you could just think. You could just allow your thoughts to wander for a few minutes, or just look at the world around you. A beautiful day. There's trees, there's plants, there's birds chirping. Just let your mind wander among that. But you fill it with crap. Every given moment, they fill it with crap. And this crap, this language, this decrypt, asinine language of social media, this short form, biscuit type of information that's delivered to them, is corrupting the minds of people. It's reducing their critical thinking skills. It's reducing their attention spans. It's reducing their cognitive faculties. It's reducing their memory, their recollective faculties. It's creating what we would now call brain rot, which is now, I think it's soon to become an official scientific term because it's being used so often. That, and I haven't even reached the position of AI yet. I haven't even talked about that yet. But if you were to bring that into perspective, it becomes even worse. It becomes much, much worse, because now you've got people, again, demonstrating that metacognitive failure and that Dunning-Kruger effect, whereby they find now shortcuts of consuming book content. I've seen a few who are now saying that, you could just take a book, like find a PDF or something, and then put it in the chat, the GPT, and then tell it to give you the basic points of it. And it'll give you the basic points of a 500-page book. It will give it to you in a single page. And you could just read those bullet points. Ergo, you know what the book is about. You could tick it off your checklist and say, I've read this book. But that's not reading. That you just gotten a summary of it. You've just gotten a data summary, which even in and of itself, it's probably not accurate, because it's a language model. It's based on whatever language, whatever words you give it, it's going to spew out the words in the same manners. So the human input of interpreting that information, even that is void. It's absent. I mean, along with all the other problems with AI, I don't really want to get into the detail because that's a different subject altogether. But the final point that I wanted to talk on this is the matter of dreams. One of the things that a lot of people are experiencing is they're experiencing dreams that have got no coherency, yeah, actually, I have another one thing to go. Dreams that have got no coherency, that make no sense whatsoever, that are in and of themselves creating a kind of depression, and or people who are just simply not able to remember their dreams at all. And the reason, one of the reasons, there are many reasons for that, because one of the reasons is that when people wake up, they are immediately encountering a sort of a flood of information coming in from now the world around them. Once you get into the motion of daily activity, you kind of tend to lose. You tend to start forgetting the dream itself. It's like holding water in your hands, it slowly starts slipping away. But that's a natural thing, and that's okay. But what's happening with people is that because of the content that they're consuming and the manner in which they're consuming all this content it's first of all, it's destroying their imaginative faculty. Their imagination actually is not working the way it should in terms of that immersion. What reading for immersion would otherwise do for your imaginative faculty to really expand that, the content that's being consumed is destroying the imaginative faculty because it's replacing abstraction with forced information. So people are being force-fed information, but do not have the span to abstract anything from that information. One of the things that long-form structures do in sentences is that they give you compounded ideas in a fashion that is layered. And that's very important for an individual's dreams, because dreams are themselves, by their nature, they are layered. They are layered in metaphor and in symbolism and in abstract forms. And, it is upon the individual's imaginative faculty to really draw out from those metaphoric constructs, from those many layers. But that has to be trained. The imaginative faculty is one of the faculties of the brain and the mind. It has to be trained. If it is not trained, if in much the same way that memory has to be trained and cognition has to be trained, language learning is a training, so imaginative faculties also have to be trained. Individuals who read long form content, especially fiction content. It will really help train the imaginative faculty because it expands the horizons of understanding within simulated environment. It forces you to build an imagination from what you've read to create a world inside your mind, whereby visualization is taking place within that. And for each individual, based on what they read, they will have a different construct, a different concept that their imaginative faculty creates for them. Force-fed information removes that completely because you're being told what a thing is rather than you being allowed to visualize it yourself. Video content is even worse than text content because video content just shows you exactly what it is. And one of the reasons why cinema is not really considered literature, even though cinema is a medium of storytelling, but it is its own medium, of its own style of storytelling, a visual representation. But it cannot replace actual literature, and it's not considered literature in and of itself because it is doing the visualization for you, whereas visualization is something that is meant to be part of your agency, meaning something you should be able to do yourself by reading. With an increased imaginative faculty allows for sophisticated construction of dreams. And dreams are very important for psychology of the human being because dreams are one of the ways in which information overload during the day can be processed by and resolved in a sleep state. So if you've got a lot of information that you've encountered during the day, whatever it might be, whatever activity it might be, whether it's work, whether it's social interactions. It could be related to your rational faculties. It can also be related to emotions. It can be related to desires. There are a lot of desires that we do on a day-to-day basis suppress for ourselves. And that can get resolved in a dream whereby, such a desire can be explored. The dream will be the nafs, which is the primary that constructs the dream, can construct a domain in which that desire can be fulfilled so that it can get resolved, so that it does not become overwhelming to the degree of causing you harm in your wakeful state. And the same is true for emotions. We have a lot of encounters with people day in, day out, and we suppress a lot of these emotions with those people. These emotions can get resolved in a dream state. However, the construction of the dream, which is belonging to the imaginative faculty, that needs to be nurtured in the wakeful state. It has to be trained, you see? And if it is not trained in that sense, then construction of dreams becomes very deficient. And so things that are meant to be resolved in that natural way, they don't get resolved, and then they spill over into our wakeful state, you see, and they can and they become very harmful. People get angry for no reason. They don't even know why they're getting angry, and it's because of those unresolved emotions. Or they will find themselves drawn into temptations that they cannot understand why they're being drawn into those temptations, even though they know rationally that they shouldn't be given into those temptations. But then they end up eventually giving themselves over, and it becomes dangerous for them. So in terms of even remembering a dream, the more vivid a dream, the better it will be remembered. But that vividness of a dream is reliant entirely upon an individual's imaginative faculty. That has to be trained. It has to be cultivated. It is why, in the traditional sense, children were told stories when they were young. Now children are just given tablets and devices and cartoons and stuff like that. So their imaginative faculty is not developed. And then over time, it just becomes crushed. And that's why you find a lot of people who just don't have imagination. People will say things like, I'm not a good artist, I'm not a good writer, I'm not a good this because I don't have the talent. It's got nothing to do with talent. Talent doesn't exist in Islam. Talent is a Western concept. But in Islam and psychology in Islam, there's no such thing as talent. Yes, there are people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the gifts or equips them pre-hand, and so they're able to do it more naturally. But as for everybody else who is not granted that gift, they can still learn it. There's no limitation whatsoever on anybody to be artistic or to be creative or to be a good writer or to be a good composer or to be anything. There is no limitation. Everybody has got access to all the knowledges of the human, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted the human being. Well, and in Islam, it is seen as a skill that you can acquire. It might be easy for some people to acquire that skill or difficult for others to acquire that skill, but you can still acquire it. It's got nothing to do with Allah didn't give me the talent or something like that. It's a matter of how you cultivate it. It's a matter of whether you're going to, dedicate some effort to it and to train yourself in it. That's all that it requires. And the training is not being done, and that's the problem. The problem, what has happened is, now going back to our primary discussion of literacy and post-literacy, is that the post-literate society has now become, has become a society that is losing its ability to read, because reading is a skill. It is a skill that goes beyond just learning the words and how to pronounce them. It is a skill that is acquired both tuitively, but largely intuitively. And everybody develops their own methodology, their own style, not just in terms of the reading itself, but in terms of the environment in which they read and how they build that environment for themselves. There are three things that I think, there could be more, that result or that produce this that limit, I would say, reading ability. One of these is cognitive overload. There is just too much cognitive overload with life as it is, in addition to devices, social media, even AI for that matter, and drawing information from AI or processing of information, just to be more productive or to produce more or to advance to the next level or such and such and such. That cognitive overload has to do with the amount of information that's processed on a daily basis and also the medium through which that information is processed. The devices are digital devices, and like I said, they emit the light information. They don't reflect light, and it's not even natural light, right? That digital light, the information contained within it, which is frequency and amplitude and luminance and all those things, they actually result in cognitive overload because it's just too much for the brain to process. The brain is processing all that light and the digital fluctuations and the exact pixelations. And I'm making up my own words at this point, but I'm trying to get a point across. That digital medium, the way it is designed, much more now with regards to what is produced by AI, for example, the information, it's not like if you look at some of these now new video contents that are coming up that are made by AI, that package, it's not made by a human being. It's not made by anyone with an artistic mind. So what you're looking at is not even a human production that you can relate with, that you might be able to see where they have made or why they've made certain choices in terms of the way they're depicting whatever it is that they're depicting, whether it's an image or a video or whatnot. It's now just purely AI, which is basically a matter of information that's been packaged together. There's no real designation as to why certain bits of information should be in certain places. If you look at photography in the classical sense, a photographer, there was a certain intent behind the photographer's choice of angle and light and brightness and contrast and other things like exposure and these things. There was a choice behind that. There's a reason. There's like a story he's trying to tell when he's taking that image. Photography now is just whoever's got an iPhone or whatever is just click, 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 click. There's no real intent behind it. It's just if the intent is there, it's really to get the one image that will gain you the most views or the most comments or the most reactions. There's no real story being told behind. There's no meaning in that. And all that information, it's just irrelevant information that the brain has to take because you are exposing it by its design. It has to process that information. All that information just sits there. It cannot be processed. Your human capacity just simply cannot process it. And it weighs down on every individual psychologically. And if it doesn't get resolved over a period of time, it is going to result in depression mostly, but it will also result in obsessive compulsive disorders because it's not being resolved. It's going to bug the individual. The second thing is that limits the ability to read is embodiment. The medium that is being embodied, things like texture, I just spoke about light, things like texture, spatial and temporal markers. Like if you've got a book, and as I said, as an example, if you've got a book and you're reading this book, there's information at the top here that's different from the information at the bottom here, that's different from this and different from that. And then there's the turning of the page that's different from that. It's all different because in and of itself, though it looks the same, it is printed on a different page. It's got a different texture. It's got a different feel. The weight of the book itself, how I'm holding it, the way I'm going to position myself, and the way the light is affecting this thing, the angle of the light. I mean, even right now I can see, usually I don't have this many lights right now. It's because of the cameras and the recording. But usually when I'm reading this, it's a different perspective. I'm seeing this in different light because I usually have a different light source. But I'm seeing different shadows on my page. And that in itself is an embodiment, because it's immersing me not just in terms of the information, the content itself, but also me physically. I am embodying whatever it is that I am reading. The third thing that I think limits reading ability in terms of really grasping whatever it is that someone reads is the shallowing effect. The shallowing effect is essentially to do with the content itself. If you're reading an article, for example, online, chances are that that article is SEO optimized with keywords and certain phrases that are common in pop culture and that are designed specifically to hook you onto reading that. Now, what's happened with over the last 15, 20 years is that almost all content is designed based on that language set. So we've basically become trained to read in that language set. Certain metaphors and certain mannerisms in which that speech is expressed, we've been trained to only read in that format. So when you pick up a book, let's say that was published in the early 1900s, or like what I have here is Sherlock Holmes, and if you read that, a lot of people, if they read that, it'll throw them off. They won't be able to. They can't follow that, because their language set does not. I'm not just talking about vocabulary. I'm talking about style, structure, rhetoric, logic itself, the way propositions are built, how ideas are expressed, the interlinking mechanism between stories that are complex, and there are different connections that the author requires you to make. There are certain assumptions that certain writers they have when they write a certain text, even scholarly texts for that matter. For example, like Imam al-Ghazali, his Mustasfa, he assumes that you know logic. And so he writes the book accordingly. If you don't know logic, you won't know what he's talking about. You see? So those are the kind of language sets. The language set for most people today is built around social media, pop culture, TV, and film. It's based off of that. Now, even TV and film and books that are written, there are still people who write. Wouldn't call them writers, but they still do that. Even those are built on the same language set. So, if you look at films that are produced these days, they don't have long, complex dialogues. It's short, clippy dialogues, snarky remarks, sassy statements, vulgarity to express emotion, and then the quick camera cutting, editing the shots in between. Like it's basically TikTok that's been stitched together. That's talking on the same subject point, but that's basically it. It's just giving you the same, scroll effect. In filmmaking, the shot cutting now, the editing techniques that are used now is basically on average every shot is cut at around 2.5 seconds, 2.5 seconds. You'll see a cut. If you want to try this experiment, you can look at some of the newer films that have been produced. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find one that can actually deliver some sort of profundity. But majority is just garbage. But even then, you'll find that the technique used in filmmaking, because editing is a process of filmmaking, it's roughly about 2.5 seconds on average per shot, where you'll find the camera cuts and the shot shifts to a different angle. And that's to keep up with the audience's short attention span, because they're trained in the TikTok, Instagram mode of consuming information. Otherwise, the filmmaker cannot retain the audience's attention otherwise. But if you look at films, like in the 60s and 70s, it's much longer per shot. And most people cannot watch those films. Like if you watch, let's say, like the 10 Commandments, which is an amazing film, it's roughly about 3.5 hours, I think. And some of the scenes are really long with a single camera shot where you're watching the dynamics between the characters. And I prefer that form of filmmaking because the quick cutting just disorients me when I'm trying to pay, because I like good dialogue. I don't like the whole action explosion gun thing. I just don't like that at all, especially if it's really dragged out. And I mean, film nowadays is just, it's like 80% of the film is just special effects and guns and shooting and all that, and then 20% is dialogue, and then of that 20% it's just four-letter curse words. It's ugh, you know. But anyway, I think what's the time? What? Oh, okay, so we're quite overboard on that. So but this is that shallowing effect whereby everything has been made shallow because the way people are thinking in and of itself is shallow. So people are trained now, and they're trained from childhood. The reason why literacy rates are dropping is because children themselves cannot read, not because the school can't teach them, but because what's teaching them or what they're being taught is to read based off of things like emojis and those two-letter sentences or three-letter sentences that have no meaning. They're shallow in themselves, or the YouTube content that they will be watching, or the movies that are produced that really are in and of themselves just shallow. The dialogue generally between characters, when you see in film or when you read in some of these books, it's just shallow dialogue. There's no real depth to the exchange that's taking place. Is that the other one? Okay, so yeah. So anyway, inshallah, I think we can stop here. We'll take a break and inshallah pray Maghrib, and then maybe we can resume afterwards and have some questions and answers, inshallah. So I think Jazakumullah khairan. That's all I have a lot more to say on this. But maybe we'll have to do another session for that. Anyway, inshallah. Let's take a break, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Inshallah. Let's start. Any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sister Hina, you may please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Can you hear me?
Ustad, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the session. I have many questions. So I'll ask one by one, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first is, what is the method of reading books? For example, when I try to read books, I take out 2 or 3 and then try to read a portion every day from all of them. So like smaller books, if they are very intriguing or attention, they grasp the attention, we can read them fast. But the thicker books, like suppose the mukaddima or something like that, then they take a lot of time. So what should we do? Should we just distribute time or finish one book at a time, or what is the way of reading books?
Well, I mean, everybody uses a different methodology that suits them. For me, I usually separate my books based off of books that I study. Those are different from books that I read, and this is where I made that distinction between reading for information and then reading for knowledge. So books that I study, which would be books for information, those are kept separately. And then books that I would normally read for critical thinking or immersion, I read those separately. And then I make the difference between the categories of the books depending on the complexity of the subject itself. So you can read 2-3 books at the same time. I do that. Every day I will read several books across different subjects. But it's whatever seems to work best for you in terms of how you're able to absorb it, or how you're able to keep pace with it, and just refine that. The good thing is, or the more important thing is, to maintain consistency in reading. So even though you might read a book that's captivating, that you can read faster, but then other books are taking longer, that's okay, that's fine. Even if you're going to read those books, small sections at a time or a little bit at a time, that's okay. There's some books that will require you to make notes, or to make annotations, or to make just to sort of look things up, or do a little bit of more research. I mean, something like the Muqaddimah that you mentioned, that's really a scholastic text. And it is of a the language itself is much more sophisticated. It's more of a study text as well as a critical thinking text. So that will take a long time to finish, to understand. Some books will require multiple readings. You can't do a single reading and then get that. Multiple readings. The first reading would be much quicker. The second reading, you might go a little bit more into depth. So there are different ways to read such books as well. The way I do it is, if it's a book I've never encountered before, I will first look at the table of contents to kind of get the forest for the trees. At least it gives me an understanding of what topics are going to be covered in there. And then it'll also give me an understanding of which topics I am familiar with, and which topics might require a lot more attention for me to look into. And then I will skim through the book, going chapter by chapter. I'll just skim through, which will give me like a visual location of the chapter heading, and what page it's on, etc., stuff like that. And then occasionally I'll just stop and read a random paragraph, or I'll flip through a few pages and read another paragraph, or like that. That will also give me a gauge of how quickly am I able to grasp the subject just out of a random read. And so now I'll be able to sort of pace myself out accordingly. And
That would be
and then I will do a fast read. I'm not going to slow down. I'm not going to stop and think. I'm just going to do a fast read of the book, finish it cover to cover. Then once I have like this sort of thematic representation of what the book is about, and some things I will have grasped, some things I will not. But when I do a second read now, I will do a more critical reading. I'll actually probably even have a notebook with me, and I'll even take some notes as I'm reading. So that's just generally my methodology when it comes to complex works. And then simpler works are, well, easy to read.
But sometimes the language is complicated. You have to sit with a dictionary. You have to actually, it takes a lot of time, especially the difficult works.
Yeah.
Like if you start reading Allama Iqbal, then you're lost, totally lost. So should we just push ourselves through, like you said, first read it at least once cover to cover?
At least once cover to cover, but not critical in the first go, because it can become frustrating and it can become demotivating as well. So you don't want that to happen. Remember, you're also going to be battling your nafs in that regard, because reading requires effort, and the nafs does not like effort. So you want to also give the nafs a little bit of trickery and motivate yourself. So, a quick read over, and if you take it step by step, similar to like, climbing the tree or climbing the mountain step by step. So, read the table of contents, maybe read what's in the back. Sometimes another technique is to just look at the last pages and see the conclusion. And that will at least give you an idea of where that book is headed. You want to just get bits and pieces here and there and sort of position yourself. And then just do a quick read without stopping, even if there are words you don't understand. The interesting thing about our intelligence is that when it comes to reading, though we may not know the meaning of a word or the definition of a word, we can still work out what it means in context. So if you just do a continual read without even referencing that word up, maybe make a note of, I want to kind of know what this word means, so then you can look it up later on in the dictionary, but just keep flowing through it. Even if you don't get it, just keep going through it. Because when you do a second read, a lot of those things that you didn't understand that actually start popping up. You'll get it. You'll get it the second time around when you do a more in-depth read. There are some tricks, like one of my teachers used to use just a piece of paper, like a blank piece of paper, and he would just lay it out as a straight line on each line, and then he would just go line by line, and he would keep moving the paper down as he's reading and just go line by line, and he would just keep moving it. He wouldn't stop. He would just keep going. And so the idea behind that was to just keep it going, just keep moving. Don't stagnate, and because you could get frustrated, you're not getting it, and then lose interest in not moving, reading further. So those are kind of tricks that you do. These are for complex works. There's some works, as you continually train yourself with reading, there are some works that will actually come very easy to you. If you're a proficient reader, they'll be very easy for you to grasp, because a lot of ideas are interchangeable, and some phrases and expressions, depending on the language, they're common phrases and expressions, so you'll be able to work them out very easily.
Right. Ustad, the second, sorry, there's a lot of noise in the background. What about reading a variety of books? For example, I started reading George Orwell. So the shorter book, the Animal Farm went well.
Mhm.
But as I started reading 1984, it started affecting me, because we see that Orwellian atmosphere, everything. I just couldn't get through it. The same happened with William Dalrymple, studying about the grandeur of the Mughals, and then the end, what happened to them. I mean, the severed head of his son being placed in front of the father. So it's so depressing to read. So, do you suggest that we read a lot of variety, just get through it, or just we should avoid reading all that stuff?
No. It's okay to read that. Variety is good because, some books do have tragic endings, and some have depressing endings, and some have happy endings. So having that variety is good. To have different books that you would read multiple times or at the same time, it's important, yes, because some books do have a heavy effect, especially if the immersion is so strong. But again, those books are not designed for you to only be immersed. They are designed for you to think about that, to be, the dramatization in some of these books is it's not realistic per se. It is dramatized, it is embellished, but they're done that deliberately to prompt a kind of thinking and reflection on that. So that's really the end objective of that writing. So I mean, having a mix of different books that have different kinds of feelings. There's some books that are lighthearted, some books that are humorous, so having that variety is a good thing. Even if you're doing just small bits of each one, and you're not actually finishing the book as soon as you thought you might, like if you've got a reading target of reading one book a month and finishing it, but now you've got 5 books and you're not finishing any of those, that's still fine. It's okay. As long as you're still reading.
And one last question. Would you suggest reading science fiction as well?
I'm not really a fan of science fiction. There are some science fiction that I think are good to read. But science fiction is generally good. The only issue with science fiction that I find is the language quality in science fiction is contemporary language. And so you don't really benefit from the sophistication of language that you would otherwise get in fantasy, for example. But the unfortunate thing is much of works that are being produced today are, even the fantasy, it's just decrypt language. But there are other works that are very good. And that's why I prefer fantasy, because in fantasy, you can involve philosophy and theology. And in science fiction as well, you can involve theology and philosophy. One of the books I like in science fiction is Frank Herbert's Dune. I have it on my shelf. I have the first 3 books of his. He wrote 6 books, but he never finished the story. He passed away before. But the first 3 books is where I like it because he explores those theological, philosophical, and some philosophical and political themes as well. So I really enjoy that, seeing his ideas. There are other books as well. Aldous Huxley's book. Why am I blanking out? There's Brave New World is a very good book, science fiction. There's a book titled Ender's Game. That's a very good science fiction book. So there are some books that are very good in science fiction. These are books that ideally are written for the purposes of exploring the human endeavor for science and technology, and exploring the ideas of how far, how reaching, and what sort of consequences are we looking at when those things are explored to those extents. You see, so and some films also are very good in that regard. 2001: Space Odyssey is a very good film to watch if you're interested in science fiction and the ideas therein. It really makes puts a lot of questions in perspective, especially now with the whole AI thing, because I mean it's amazing some of those ideas conceptually can still be applied, and so it puts things into perspective. These are ideal. They're good for, again, to think about. And when you look at these stories, it's not just a fascination about the amazing things that are being done in that, but also the ideas that are being explored in that. Yeah.
Jazakallahu khairan.
Yeah.
Personal. We have no questions from this side. If there are any from that side,
Okay, so there was actually a question that somebody had sent me in an email to ask, and I promised them that I would address it in the lecture. There's actually 3 different people who had sent me questions, but I think I addressed one of those in today's session. Somebody had asked me about how do we cultivate reading, with regards to, let's say, like in our own lives. I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing of the question. With regards to our own lives and, with regards to children, for example, how do we cultivate reading? There's actually 2 people who asked me that question. And I don't know if I addressed it in part during today's session. Maybe I didn't really go or explain it as well. I mentioned it earlier about the lifestyle that we are living. You see, like the literate society and the post-literate society. The literate society had part of their lifestyle, a reading lifestyle, and in the much older generations, their life included the activity of reading. People had in their homes, I mean, this is before television came in, before radio came in. Now we've got in our homes, for example, the layout and the architecture is designed to accommodate a television and not so much a radio anymore, but a television at least, and a computer. I mean, modern homes even have, sockets where you can plug in. It's so interesting how modern society just sort of wants to shove this down everybody's throat. There are even, like, I've seen some homes that have got sockets that have a USB charge port. Like wherever you go, you could probably plug in your port and keep using your device. And then you've got Wi-Fi and everything around the house, which is all okay. It's not. I'm not saying eliminate technology altogether and go to the dark ages, but there's part of lifestyle. The lifestyle itself has changed, whereby books are not part of lifestyle now. They're seen as the exception. They're regarded as like the hobby. I wanted to talk about a little bit about normalization and the idea of normalization, but we didn't get a chance. Maybe session 3, if we're going to do part 3 of this lecture. But reading is considered as something of a hobby. And now we have to turn that around, really, if we want to cultivate a lifestyle and encourage our kids to read as well. We have to change the lifestyle of the home to incorporate reading as if it is part of our lives, in as much as eating is part of our lives, and sleeping and everything else that we do is part of our lives. In pre-modern homes, people would have, even if they don't have a big house where they can dedicate a whole room to it, but they would at least have somewhere a place in their home that would be used for reading and would be utilized for that purpose. And people had or tried to have good display of books, or a good collection of books, which are also so often part of social discussions, what sort of books a person has. One thing I do, I don't know why I do this, it's like a habitual thing, but whenever I go to anybody's home, I just start instinctively looking for a bookshelf, because I kind of want to know what books they have. And it's very disappointing, because a lot of homes that I go to just don't have any shelves or any books on their shelves. So, but in terms of answering that question, how do we bring that about? You need to turn it into something that might be a hobby, into something that's actually part of your life and part of your daily routine. You want to do this in a more disciplined way. Find an area of your home whereby you can dedicate to just being reading. A place in your home where you have a bookshelf, if you have a chair or something, just whatever, make an environment for yourself, wherever that might be, wherever you're able to find it in your home. Invest in that if you have to invest in that. Put some money into that. If you have to buy a bookshelf, if you have to buy some physical copies of books, put that money in. Do it slowly. You don't have to do it all at one go and have a fully functional place tomorrow, but do it in time. For me and for us in this home and for my family, this area where you see me sitting here, this is our reading corner. These shelves were built. I built them here. We dedicated this corner to be our reading corner, and this is different from what you see when behind me at my desk, where the books are also different. Those are my studying books, but these are my reading books, and this is where I will sit and read. But it's not just about building the infrastructure. You have to also dedicate yourself, designate time where you will sit and read, and make it a habitual process, as if it is part of your daily routine. For me, that time is after Fajr. I will pray my Fajr, and then I will sit here and I will read until the sun comes up. And when my children wake up, they will come and they will see me sitting here and read. And so it also nurtures in them that, that's part of life. And they will do it also whenever they're able to do it. So like, this is my corner here. I have whatever my books are for reading. I actually don't usually have this lamp here. This is for decoration only, to make the camera look nice. I have a pencil. I have a small magnifying glass, because my eyes are now starting to fail me. I'm not that old, but I'm not able to read small print anymore. So some of the books I require a magnifying glass to just enlarge the text. I have scrap pieces of paper so I can take notes. I have this table where I will have my tea or my coffee in the morning, and I read by candlelight. So I actually have one candle here. I don't like reading by artificial light, especially in the morning. When I wake up for Fajr, I don't like artificial lighting at all. I switch on a candle and I go about my activities until the sun comes up. And I actually make my own candles also, because for me, I the light and the wick and how long because like commercial candles, I found they're really cheap. They just make them so you can go back 2 days later and buy another one. So I make my own candles, and that's my habitual, my life. It's part of my lifestyle. You don't have to do it exactly like that. You can make something of your own, but the idea behind it is to bring it as part of make it as part of your daily routine. So for me, that's my daily routine. It would be about an hour or so in the morning after Fajr and when the sun comes up. And then it would be about half an hour before bed. And I will read different books, whatever I feel like reading at that time. That's my normal routine. So this is you want to cultivate it like that, because then when your children see it, for them as they're growing up, they will see that as part of lifestyle. The unfortunate thing is that most families and most homes, what they are seeing as part of lifestyle is the use of devices for everything. The father is always on the phone and the mother is always on the phone and everybody's scrolling. And so in their perspective, that's reality. See, that's normal for them now because they're seeing that as a normality. So you want to flip that. You want to completely change that. And this is something you have to do. Everyone has to do it, themselves, practically do it themselves. Don't expect the society to influence you or the economy to be in your favor or ABCD, whatever it is. It's something that you have to cultivate for yourself, whether you're able to do it quickly or you do it, gradually as it takes time. I know a lot of homes that have dedicated space for Salah, for example. That's a good thing. And that same space also can be used for cultivating reading. Homes before, Muslim homes always had part of their home was dedicated for those purposes, where you had a place where it was your sanctum of just prayer. And then you had another place whereby it was just where you'd sit and read. So, this is my advice to everyone. Just if you want to really combat the destruction of human civilization, to really save yourselves from the fitna of this age, because it's people don't realize it. They think that such fitna is just going to be a physical fitna, fighting wars and this and that and the other, and economy. So everybody is looking for how they can maybe secure their wealth. Should I invest in gold? Should I buy land? Should I move to the village? Should I do all this? But that's a very small measure of the threat that we are facing. The bigger threat is the spiritual and intellectual loss, because all of that matters nothing. You could secure yourself in a bunker for all that, man. It's not going to save you if your spiritual, your psychological, and your intellectual powers are decrypted, because that's the human quality. And so if you take that away from the human being, he's no longer a human being. He's a jasad. You see, he's an empty body. So, if you want to save yourselves from that fitna, stop worrying about land and investment and securing a house in the village. Start worrying about your current state of being and how you can fix that individually. You need to get rid of all these other things that have seeped into culture. Social media and all these things, you need to get rid of all that. You don't need to switch it off completely. If you're using it, it's fine, you're using it, but that cannot be the norm. That should be the exception. If you're checking into Facebook, that cannot be a daily routine that you do. That's supposed to be something, a couple of days later or something, a couple of minutes, and let me just say, that's something you do it as an exception. That's not the norm. We've turned that into the norm. Everybody wants to check their messages and do the WhatsApp things and do the Instagram things every day, and it's like that's part of their life. That cannot be part of your life. Now, when you take that out, you need to replace that with something. And my recommendation to everybody is to replace that with reading, because you're going to now be able to reverse the effects of that dementalization of creating stupid society. Stupidity is an actual term in philosophy. There's a specific subject of study of under philosophy where stupidity is studied, because it's one of those wonders of humankind that a lot of philosophers cannot make sense of it. But that's the society that's being created, a society of idiocy. a society that is void of common sense, a society that cannot add numbers, that cannot, if you give that society, a sentence that's longer than 5 words, they'll lose it. A society that cannot articulate, that cannot express themselves, that cannot understand basic stuff. And Muslims are no different in this regard. Muslims are just even the same, suffering the same ordeal. Just being a Muslim is not going to save you. I see a lot of Muslims who demonstrate, metacognitive error and failure. They are so confident about what they think they know, and yet they know very little. Or the Dunning-Kruger effect, whereby most Muslims are either at the peak of Mount Stupid or they are in the valley of despair, but will not make the effort to try and raise themselves up any further. I'm not just saying this because I'm ranting or something. You can open Facebook and YouTube and you can see it for yourself. Look at the kind of content that's being, forwarded out there, or the kind of WhatsApp messages that people keep forwarding with each other. That's not intellectual. There's nothing academic about it. There's no profound knowledge being shared. There's no real solution that's being given to anybody. It's all nice words and sweet words that sound good, that want to sound like it's wisdom, but it's empty and hollow and baseless and just shallow rhetoric. There's no real depth to any of them, because those same people, they don't know what depth is. Their thinking is guided by the same content in which they're indulging in, day out. We don't need those things. We don't need Facebook. We don't need Instagram. We don't need these things. Why do we have this on the phones? Why do we have data packets on the phones? You actually don't need those things. I don't have that. I don't have social media apps on my phone. I don't have that. I have email and I have WhatsApp and Telegram, because that's where my message is coming from my students, and I have exchanges with my teachers and a few updates and whatnot. Even then, I don't even check those. Those who message me, they know this. It might be an hour or so, maybe 2 hours, even 2 days later, I might see your message and respond to it. I don't even engage with those things. I don't have a data packet on my phone. I don't. When I'm in the house and when the Wi-Fi is connected, that's when I might have a connection to that. I don't have that. I have phone calling, I have texts, and I have email. That's all I have on my phone. You don't actually need all those things. The point it doesn't matter how big a businessman you might be, you don't actually need those things. We just justify ourselves to fulfill temptations and desire. We are turning what is supposed to be an exception into a normal, into a foundational part of society, or a foundational part of our lives. And then when that thing is not there, we are in distress, we are in anxiety, we are in depression. And at the same time, our intelligence is deteriorating. We are rotting our own brains. We are rotting our thinking. And then we are wondering why our children are not responding, why my son cannot eat, why my this cannot do that, why are you complaining? It's your own fault. It's not natural. If you're intelligent enough, you can see that it is not natural. This is not how things are supposed to be. And all it takes is a little bit of common sense to say, I don't want this kind of lifestyle. And then make the effort and change that. You'll still survive. You won't die if you don't check into your Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Just remove all that stuff. Get rid of it. Replace it with something that's going to give you, precious understanding, that's going to give you depth, that's going to cultivate your intelligence. Because if you think that you're going to fight, if you think that you're going to be able to battle the fitna of this age the way we are, no, I'm sorry. There's no winning this. This is why the world is the way it is. This is why the world is the way it is. Why AI is winning. Why the forces that be are dominating. And this is prophecy. You can find the hadith if you want it. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Antum ghutha'un ka ghutha' as-sayl." You will be like the froth that is the froth of torrential water. Froth or scum is a word for that. If you have ever boiled beans, if you have ever boiled dry beans, you'll find this whitish foam that pops up at the top that you have to scum off. You take that out. You don't consume that. That is called froth. It's called scum. It's empty. It's shallow. It's got no weight to it. It's not got any nutritional value to it. Now, can you imagine your own prophet calling you that? This is our prophet who is saying, this is what you're going to be at. This is what you're going to be like. Your enemies are no longer going to fear you. They're going to consume you the way someone consumes a plate of food. They're going to eat you up, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's got nothing to, you will be many in number. You will be countless in number. Every day you hear this one became Muslim, that one became Muslim, that one became Muslim. Even celebrities becoming Muslim. And here we are clapping our hands. Yeah. So-and-so became Muslim. Yeah, subhanallah, mashallah, alhamdulillah. These are the commentators, right? Those who come into the post and they make the comment down there. Mashallah, subhanallah, what. Right? These are the intellectuals. We're many in number. We keep counting ourselves. We keep boasting about it. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. So what? So what? But he said, Rasulullah, Allah is going to remove awe of you from the hearts of your enemies, and He's going to replace that awe with wahan. And the Sahabas asked, what is al-wahan? He said, karahiyatul maut. He said, hubbud dunya karahiyatul maut. A love of this dunya, a love of materialism, and a fear, a phobia, a hatred of that desire of death. We are a people who have become cowards. Cowards. Why? Not because of physical strength, because up here, there's nothing. It's hollow now for most people. And we can see the way we talk, the way we behave, the way we dress, the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we do everything. When you've got people who are walking, 50-year-old men who are walking with their phones in their hands, they can't even see where they're going. They're walking right into a wall. And then they suddenly look stunned, change trajectory, and then keep walking with the phone still in the hand. Or a mother will pick up her child at school and not pay any attention to that child, walk with the phone in her hand, and then stop in the middle of the road to take a selfie picture or whatever so she can post it on social media, and then keep walking with the phone in her hand and still not pay attention to that child. This is the society. This is everywhere. This is not just Europe or United States or whatever. This is everywhere. If you're in India, I guarantee you look outside the door, you will see this happening. Go to a restaurant and you will see children sitting on iPads and phones and parents sitting on iPads and phones. And they've apparently gone out to have a family meal. And then when that family meal is done, well, before the family meal begins, they will take pictures of their food and selfies of their food. And then when the family's meal is done, they will take pictures of their whatever selfies, and then those will be posted to commemorate the memory that we went and had a good. This is Muslims, how Muslims behave. This is Muslims going out, going for Hajj, spending so many dollars, living in 5-star restaurants, staying in 5-star restaurants over there. And then what do they do when they go to the haram? They will take a selfie of themselves with 2 fingers like this. This is Muslims. Sadaqa Rasulullah. He spoke the truth. He spoke the truth. We are like scum. We are like the froth of the sea. So, you want to face the fitna, you need to fight it yourself. And this is how you fight it. You need to cultivate this up here. You need to change what's in here. Because problems with Muslims are not logistic. They're never logistic. Problems with Muslims are spiritual. They're metaphysical. They're ontological. They're teleological. They have to do with what's in here and what's in here. And this is what we need to cultivate. It's not about being good akhlaq and doing all these things. No, we need to be individuals who can think, who can understand, who can reason. You see, this is how we protect ourselves, and this is how we protect our children. Anyway, that's turning into its own lecture in its own right, but I hope that I'm sorry. Anyway, is there any other question, any other comment or remark on the Zoom?
Sister Hina, please ask the question.
Ustad, I just wanted to ask you, how do we know if we are not on Mount Stupid?
That's a good question. Actually, I mean, the the theory is that everybody actually finds themselves on that, and it does happen because it's a nafsi thing. That based on little information, somebody can have a lot of confidence because they've kind of gotten an opening into a field that they had no exposure to before. So everybody actually ultimately finds themselves. I mean, even I do sometimes. I might read an article and suddenly feel like, oh, actually, I get this. It's an easy subject. And then I might read another article and then realize, oh yeah, I actually don't understand the subject at all. So this happens. It happens to everyone. The point of the issue is not being on Mount Stupid. The issue is being on the valley of depression down there and not being humble about it. That's where the issue lies. And people, that's where there are a lot of Muslims. I always criticize Muslims because they're my own people, and it really hurts me. It really pains me to see this. And I'm not gonna lie, I have cried about it, especially like when I'm doing research and I'm putting together the topics that we will do in the Sirah. It really pains me because I mean those people, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the things that they sacrificed for us and what we have become. If he was to see us today, I don't know. I think he would be so heartbroken. But anyway, the issue is, a lot of Muslims, they will look at just whatever their favorite scholar might talk about on a YouTube video, and then experience that effect. They will suddenly go right up to the peak of the mount, and then the debates will start spewing from that, and they'll make all their judgments based on that. They'll judge other people, because that's even worse. It's one thing to offer your opinion, thinking that you know a lot about the subject. It's a completely different thing to judge people and to say so and so is a kafir, or so and so is on the wrong path, or so and so, etc., etc. That's just something else entirely. The problem is that when they then fall, and they all fall, we all hit that portion, all of us. It doesn't matter how educated you might be, because there's always something that you don't know. We all fall, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that fall. That in itself is a blessing, because it is an internal awakening or a realization for me to make myself better. But that part is the most difficult, the valley of despair, because at that portion, you're trying to repair an ego. The ego has been really hit. And then pride and arrogance and hubris, these type of things are very high in the individual. So it's struggle against those elements, to acknowledge I made a mistake, I don't know, I should have researched more, or I should have studied the subject, and then make the effort to rectify that position. But I find a lot of people, when they hit that position, they don't actually move from there. They either victimize themselves, or they just brush themselves off and walk on with their hubris. So that's the more dangerous portion, the valley of despair.
Ustad, would you also recommend, after we read, should we also start writing? Because they say writing makes one perfect.
Yeah,
At
I was
least.
actually going to talk about that in another session, the idea of writing. Yes, in a nutshell, yes, writing, yes. Writing is important because it will help you re-articulate what you have read, and it will help you gauge how much you have actually understood. But I was going to talk about that in another session, after like a part 3, on the importance of writing and the importance of cultivating your own you're sort of trying to see whether or not you really understood what you read. And so, like in school, if you remember, these are exercises. I don't know if they do this anymore in school, but I remember when I was in school, we used to have to do this. We would have to read something and then write an essay on that. So that was part of, it's a technique that is used in terms of gauging whether or not you really understood what you read. And then it's also a technique that helps you better your proficiency in language, because reading and writing, they go hand in hand. Literacy is not just about reading. Literacy is also about writing. Yeah. So I would encourage to answer you on that. I definitely encourage writing on everything that you study or you read. Write your own topics. Write short form contents. Write long form essays. Write assignments for yourself. Even if nobody's going to read it, it's just you who is writing it, that's fine. Write stories. That's something that I wanted to talk about, because we don't actually do that. A lot of reading and writing, by the way, is seen only in academic perspectives. And so most people, they don't feel the necessity to do it because they're not in academics. Like they've stopped school. They're no longer going to school or university. Like we used to do this when we were I don't need to do this anymore. No. The other aspect of reading and writing, which is fiction, which is story-based, that's also important. That's where the immersion, or the last piece of knowledge-based reading comes in. That's the immersion portion of stories. That's where you actually understand ontological concepts and teleological concepts. That's where the dramatics enable you to really explore, the limits of a certain idea, which you would not be able to explore in this world. So in terms of reading what somebody else has written gives you certain perspectives, but in terms of you writing about it also expands your own understanding of it, you see. So yeah, I definitely encourage writing. Is there anything else? Anyone else?
Ustad, there are no questions from the chat as well, so I think we can end the session. There are no
Okay,
questions.
let's end the session, inshallah. Hopefully we can do another session on the same, maybe after Ramadan, inshallah. جزاكم الله خيرا. الحمد لله. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خيرا. الحمد لله. Thank you everyone for coming for this session.